So I prefaced a little bit of our conversation this morning when Brian asked me to fill a seat on the panel. And I'll also say that I'm remarkably impressed not only with the caliber of the speakers at the conference, but at the content of the implementations. And I can tell you I was at Augmented World Expo, the big AR conference in Santa Clara 2 weeks ago. There were quite a few of us there. And a lot of the focus is on the industry. A lot of the focus is on the future and what's happening. And so I came in with an intent today to try to convince everybody not to wait. What I heard throughout the day is nobody's really waiting. So I'll go through the talk, but I'm going to modulate a little bit as we do it. But suffice to say, I don't have to tell you that wearables are becoming more and more relevant every day. You see some out here talk throughout the day about what people are doing to implement it. And true augmented reality, mixed reality, whatever term you want to use for it, is ultimately the holy grail to a lot of us technologists who are looking at this. But as we've talked about, there are a number of problems, functional problems, infrastructure problems, related to implementing this today. And the real question is this the level of technology required in your business to have a significant impact? I was very impressed with being able to follow George and what DHL's doing and how they're implementing it. And I think Alexander, if you saw his presentation today, talking about what Duke Energy is doing, is another great example of implementing that technology today. I don't know how many people actually saw what was happening in the demo, but they were actually using a full system in the back. Unfortunately, they were tethered with a USB cable to the computer, and so I don't think a lot of people got the full effect of the demo. But one of the things is the systems that we're looking at for the future are in trying to incorporate the kitchen sink. There's a big question about whether the difference between taking a developer kit and doing a 5-person or a 10-person pilot and taking that product and implementing it into your workforce. One of the big things that you heard today, especially starting this morning with Tom's speech, is ergonomics and human factors. So we can run this, we can write an application for this system, we can run it for 90 minutes before the battery dies, and it weighs almost 2 pounds. So how many people in the room, with a show of hands, would want to put a 2-pound headband on and wear it for 8 hours to perform your day? I can tell you the union would be negotiating new rates for labor. And I'll give you another great example. So some of this I want to go back and I want to look at great innovations that were functionally before their time. This is the new Newton message pad. For those of you who don't remember, it's from 1994. 93, 94. I knew one person in the world that used this. It was a brilliant machine. But again, it weighed 1 pound. It was 3/4 of an inch thick. You needed cargo pants to carry this thing with you. But it had automatic recognition technology. You could write at the end of a note, fax to Bob, and it would look up Bob in your contacts and send a fax to him. Pen recognition, speech recognition, absolutely fantastic. But when you look at the utility of the device versus the capability of the device, it far exceeded what people were ready for from a capability standpoint, and it far exceeded their ability from a utility standpoint to actually incorporate this into their daily lives. I think this is some of the issue that we're dealing with. We're looking at systems that are way overbuilt because we can. And we're trying to force an issue rather than focusing on real business KPIs. So as I mentioned this morning, one of the things that I ask people is, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Or are you really looking at a technology for technology's sake? In 1993, Walt Mossberg called this the beginning of the post-PC era. I still see a lot of laptops in the room. So I'm guessing we haven't quite got to that point yet. But in his mind at the time, this was signaling the advance of technology, and that's exactly what we got to. We got to mobile phones that incorporated a lot of that same technology, even better, in a shrink and a miniaturization and in a cost reduction. But I would argue that it was the augmented reality headband of its time. And so as you looked at it, we didn't revolutionize an industry based on this, but what we did start to do is incorporate new technologies into our environment. And the environment is a big, big factor in this. So as we look at infrastructure, as we look at what people have to do to implement these things, you have to look at the tools, you have to look at the information systems. It's not magic, but there is some magic in the efficiency that these products can bring. So I think, well, as we look at these pilots, as I've listened today and I've heard the messages, I guess the one question I have is, if I listen to everybody consistently, I didn't get one person stand up today and say, we ran a pilot, it was a miserable failure, we didn't realize any KPIs. I guess those guys didn't show up. But for the ones that did, and the people who are here and the people that are sitting in the room and going, yep, these are all my problems, and yep, that's what I'm doing, is why aren't we doing it faster? Why aren't we doing it more? Because we're the people that make this future by implementing the present, by upgrading our infrastructures, by convincing the IT department to stop blocking our video, by convincing management that a $500 or a $1,500 or even a $3,000 headset is going to pay for itself in 9 months is a good capital investment to make. Because the longer that we wait, the more it takes time, and we're ultimately going to have to do the same work. If we gave you 5 year from now technology today, you'd still have to go do all the same hard work to upgrade your infrastructure, to retrain your workforce. And I'm guessing that we all are part of businesses that are looking at the top line and the bottom line. Those efficiencies that George talked about, that 15%, I would take 15% now over 15% 2 years from now. And infrastructure is a big thing. If you think about the electric cars, extremely popular now. One of the first electric cars was introduced in 1997, the EV1 by General Motors. And they literally crushed the car. If you haven't seen the movie Who Killed the Electric Car, watch it. But it pointed to a lot of things, tangible benefits that at the time people were interested in. Zero emissions. But it faced very, very stringent infrastructure problems. Limited range, had to find a charging station. They were all on a lease, so they wouldn't let you buy them because they weren't sure they wanted to let people keep these things. But had we implemented that 20 years ago, instead of what we're doing now, we'd be much farther ahead. And as an industry, they blocked it, they prevented it, they didn't use it. Thankfully, we have people like Elon Musk that have put the Tesla out there, gotten huge people that are willing to pay $100,000 for these things, and all of a sudden, magically, charging stations are going up all over the country at work and in public places. And we're finally starting to realize it, and now we're getting lower technology, less and less technology coming down to meet us. So the punchline for this part is products don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in a space where they actually can do good, where they actually operate in an environment where they contribute to the greater whole. A great example, if you've seen what FedEx and UPS did for Amazon and what Amazon's doing now, Amazon wouldn't exist without these delivery services. They had a very, very simple mantra: I'm going to deliver products to people when they want them and where they want them, and tell them about other products they might like. But if you look at what they're doing now, and I'm pretty sure Jeff Bezos had this vision 10 or 15 years ago for his own delivery service and automated delivery and drones. I don't know if you've seen the lockers, but they actually have lockers inside 7-Elevens now that you can stop in and return your package. You punch a number on the code, you stick it in a bin, you close the bin. But he would not have been able to do any of that without implementing his service with what was available at the time, without leveraging the infrastructure that he had and forcing them to adapt to his needs. And that's what we're seeing now, and that's what we're encouraging and what I'm imploring the audience. So where I thought I was going to come in and say, hey, stop looking at the future, let's start implementing now, I've changed my message since 8 o'clock this morning to be, let's start implementing faster, and let's start working together on what it's going to take to pull this together. Because what I heard today was, we may be bleeding edge, but the solutions work. The efficiencies are there, the KPIs are available on the products that we can get today. And they're reasonable. We're not talking about having to go out and buy $20,000 construction helmets. We're talking about $2,000 or $3,000, in many cases less, devices that are already ruggedized, that are already proven in the field. but we have to do the hard work. It's not going to get done for us. We have to start changing those infrastructures. We have to start changing our corporate policies. We have to start pushing on the vendors for the services that we need to see to make your business efficiencies and your KPIs a reality. That's what's going to drive our business. That's what's going to deliver results. That's what's going to deliver profit. And ultimately, that's what's going to speed up the future. Because the companies that you hear today, save a few, present company included, I've got a little longevity, I got a little runway. I work for a small silicon startup out of Silicon Valley. But a lot of those guys out there are inventing the future on their own. And they need you as customers to support them, to drive these pilots, to drive these into your business practices. That's what's going to accelerate the development, and that's what's going to accelerate the future. So my punchline for this is one of my favorite movies. We all want to hit home runs. We would all love a full mixed reality device that fits into this form factor and costs $200. And someday we're going to have that. Yeah, Roland's, he's been waiting for the person to step up on stage and say that's what they're bringing today. But if you look at it, it's really the Moneyball strategy. Swinging for the fence, you might actually hit one over, but you're going to take a lot of swings. Getting people on base, getting technology implemented, getting your organizations to start to adopt this, getting your infrastructure to start to be changing, getting a trusted relationship with these vendors where you're telling them what you need next and they're willing to go deliver it because there's a revenue stream coming from it is how we deliver the future. So I'll stop preaching. I'd like to open it up for a few minutes just to Q&A and maybe an open discussion, because what I'd ultimately love to do is turn this into one big panel focus group discussion. I know Roland's not going to be shy because he's been pretty involved all day. That's why he saved that seat. And let's just have a discussion. There's one over here.
It's JP Gounder, and I know you quite well, Chris. Usually it's the Forrester analyst who's painting the vision of the future, or painting the vision of like, hey, there's so much hype out there, let's dial it back. But you're the one who's doing that on the vendor side. And tomorrow I'm going to be giving all the hype. I
know, it is a really bizarre kind of weird, yeah, I'm usually the guy preaching the future too.
It's a bit of an inversion. But you know, I'm curious because you've thrown a lot of cold water on some of these more advanced tools, right? HoloLens being one of them, I would say.
I didn't name anybody by name.
Well, it was on your slide. It was on your slide. I think what I've noticed is that there are, as you said, you wouldn't want to wear a 2-pound, computer on your face all day. But if you're doing a job that takes 30 minutes, maybe it would be appropriate, right? So can you talk about maybe cases where there may be exceptions to what you're saying? In other words, where there is an opportunity for that more leading edge technology, because real examples do exist.
I think you're right. And I came in with a premise of talking to the types of industries and the types of enterprises that are here. And if you looked at the case studies, they're very, very much in the, I guess what you and I would agree are pretty much the low-hanging fruit in terms of opportunities. And we certainly agree because we've had this conversation. Logistics, field service. I think there's a recurring theme that we've talked about in terms of workforce management and the reversal of our workforce management with the coming millennial workforce. So where we used to put our most skilled workers all the way out into the front end and give them the most challenging problems, this technology allows us to flip that and put our newest workers out and have remote assistance where if they had come back to the office and we had to roll another truck, it would kill the profitability of whatever we're working on. We can actually stop that right now. But I think you're right. I think as you look at content tools, as you look at design tools, I think the products that we're looking at in a mixed reality space are very much an outcropping of where we've been going in virtual reality for the last, say, 5 years. And visualization, I talked a little bit about this morning, changing the way your documentation is structured. Writing tech docs in a PDF and writing holograms in a Unity game engine are very, very different things. So we'll see that, design, I think some online collaboration, I think architectural, there's a lot of great examples that you can go up on YouTube and see amazing videos for. But I think as you look at the total size of the market, they're very, very small relative to what we're talking about, which is massive workforces. people that keep the world running, people that keep packages shipping, people that keep power coming to our house. Those far outnumber the architects and the graphic design people that are, going to play with us. But, and I don't want it to feel like a cold water strategy. I actually love the technology, and we're innovating and we're investing and continuing to push that envelope. But just like everybody in this space, we all have to put a stick in the ground, and we all have to say that the future is now. The present works. And that's hopefully what you get out of today's case studies. And if you aren't convinced yet, go meet some more of these people in the audience tonight at the cocktail reception, or talk to JP, because he was ahead of the crowd and wrote this 5 years ago when we all still thought we were going to be doing this just on bicycles and running around. So, all right, another question over here.
In the spirit of what you said with opening the dialogue for everybody, are you aware, or anybody in the audience aware, of any cross-industry groups that would combine, say, device manufacturers, software providers, companies that potentially could be the users? Is anyone aware of this kind of initiatives happening? Because what I'm hearing today is individual cases, individual struggles, basically. Everybody kind of does his or her own thing. They're a little bit afraid, of competitive pressure, etc. But it seems that we're sort of reinventing the wheel as we go, and we're kind of spinning, in the same spot as opposed to advancing. If we would all have some kind of more formal, let's say, way to collaborate or to set up some kind of standard and to say, okay, hey, here's the deal, for whatever, vertical 1, vertical 2, vertical 3. Here's where we all need to come together.
Well, certainly the energy industry has their own vertical that's doing a lot of work. I know there's a broad group. I'm surprised Christine's not here. I'm looking at Brian Ballard from Apex Labs. There is a group called Area, Augmented Reality for Enterprise Applications, that is striving to pull together vendors and customers and have some of those discussions. I think the good news and the bad news is that this technology today is really an evolution of compute. That's the good news. So we're leveraging a lot of things that already exist and have already been proven, like Bluetooth, like Wi-Fi. What we don't have is what we normally get in a lot of technologies, which is that bleeding edge, next generation interface, rendering stack, whatever, that's sort of driving the evolution. So it's a good and the bad. We're not waiting for something to be adopted by some standards body so that we can all adhere to the spec. But to your point, there's not a broad unification that makes it all just seamlessly work like granimals and you just plug them in. I think what you heard today and what I'm seeing is a lot of it is in the implementation. So even in the standards, I don't think that would define the specific business need and the specific business use case that each company in here is going to have. You all have unique environments, you all have unique requirements, and that's really where the system integrators are going to come in. That's where the Apex Labs and the Atheers and the folks of the world who are writing that middleware and writing that connective tissue to bring these pieces together are probably part of the most important part of that glue. Much more than the device, in my opinion.
I have a question. Sorry.
Oh, she iced you out, Roland.
Sorry, you've asked a lot. It's my turn. Christy Fiorentini from Lockheed Martin. I agree with you where the devices, I feel, we can use those in real cases, but the challenge is more of the infrastructure behind and changing the way we maybe design for using this technology. But working at a lot of the companies that we will see the most value, you're asking a company that has 100 years worth of the way we've done things. And at what point, do they see any investment in making those changes? And how can some of the vendors shape the way that their technology works so that we don't necessarily have to redo everything in order to adapt to this technology?
So I'm going to answer your statement with a question. Do you think it's a vendor problem that you haven't found the right people? Or do you think you haven't defined the problem clearly enough to let somebody come in and solve it for you?
No, I guess my question more is, instead of redoing everything, where is that middle ground? Where there are solutions out there that allow us to maybe adapt a little quicker than versus having to create everything we've done. You know, I feel like a new company would have a lot more ability to shape their operations around this technology, and you have to put all this investment in that to make that change. So it's a true struggle to make that business case. Even if you see a great KPI, how do you make the business case of shifting everything you do?
Right. I think the thing that I've seen most is, and this isn't a slam on the advanced technology people in the crowd, being a guy who lives on the bleeding edge, they're my best friends and drinking partners usually. But what I've seen in most organizations is they have their labs, their research, their leading edge technology, advanced technology, whatever term you use for it, there's a group of people in your company who are paid to go look for the next cool thing, the next big technology. And it's very different in each company how tightly woven they are with the business units and with the operations. So you heard Alexander talk from Duke. We had lunch today, and I was asking him this specific question. And he said, every project that I have, I go and I bring a person from a business unit into my project before I start. So I already have somebody standing next to me that's a partner with me in that project. I think that's how you break those barriers down. I really think how you break those operational paradigms down is by having someone that will point at it and say, I need that yesterday. That will save me money, that'll increase my productivity, or that'll generate new business. And if you can point to those things, then finance and operations and even IT will typically start to break down. And you're sort of making my point that if you accelerated the future and I had 5 year or 10 years from now technology, it doesn't change that environment. In fact, it exacerbates it. That the technology we have today solves real problems, and by not implementing it, we're actually hurting ourselves, and we're preventing us from making those changes in the future. And by the way, just so you know, I didn't mention in the presentation, but I'll just testify now in front of the audience, that we're eating our own dog food, that we have programs running in our factory using current head-mounted display platforms. So in our factory, every process to make a chip requires 2 people. One person to do an action and one person to stand there and nod and say, yeah, that's the right thing to do. So we always have a double check. We're implementing a program to put head-worn displays and cameras so that we can centralize the second person, the person that nods and says, yeah, go ahead. So we have instant scalability, so I can have that person monitor 5 or 6 people. Now we have a roadmap that goes out and starts to say, how do I get the machines to talk to the workers and pop up displays and all those types of things. But we see an immediate efficiency in workforce management just by doing that first action. And we're starting to implement that in pilot, and we're anticipating doing a broader, hopefully, soon I'll be able to share a little bit more from a case study, maybe next year. But we face the same challenges internally as a company as we do trying to go and evangelize and promote this externally. All right,
To
that's
follow
it.
up what
You're
you
up.
just said, you scaled up from, using the technology to help a single person complete a 1-person task. And now you scale it up to a 2-person task. How far can it go? I mean, I'm interested in, we have some tasks where it's a 20-person task, takes several dozens of steps, and those steps, some can be done in parallel, some have to be done sequentially. So when we're doing like a changeover, a production line, how can we use the technology to say, I'm operator number A, that's operator B, that's operator C, and I get told what to do, when to do it, where to do it, and how to do it. And I can't do my step until he's finished his, but he hits a button, says he's completed, that triggers me to go do something else. I'm trying to figure out how do you create because it's a team effort. The team is working that task. How do you create these worker bees that are all being guided by the queen bee, which could be some application software, that everyone knows what to do, a coordinated thing, like a NASCAR pit
Brian,
stop.
you're going to buy Roland a drink, right? Okay. That's Brian Ballard. He's the CEO of Apex Labs. Go talk to him at the cocktail hour. The solutions exist. That's the point. And Roland, there's people that can solve that problem today. Very simply. That's not a head-mounted display problem. That's not an augmented reality problem. That's a workforce management. That's a process improvement challenge, and those exist today. And that's exactly the point. That's what I want everybody to walk out of here with and go back to their IT departments and go, yeah, why are we waiting?
Speaking on behalf of the solution vendors in the room, like I'm one of many that are here, having people like you articulate the challenges that you face is the most important set of information that we can have at this stage of the market, because we're planning the roadmap for how to solve those problems long before they hit the market. So we've got, and our competitors and partners have plans on how to do things like that, if not already in market. But that's the communication, the dialogue that events like this pull together. So please, share the challenges you have with the people out in the hall. That's the information we're looking for to improve the technology base for everybody at this point.
So you don't have a solution yet?
Depending on,
Is that use case?
we do have a solution that is multi-user orchestration, but it does require that users be instrumented, or sensors be participating in it. The whole theme around a connected workforce is the idea that you are both an input and an output to your business process systems, and you're a participant in it. But that does require technology coming to play in that orchestration.
Last one, and then I promise, because I'm standing between the last person and cocktail now. So.
Okay, I'm going to respond to you, and I alluded to this earlier in the morning, but I want to be explicit that there's a whole lot of business sitting on the table that is tied up in companies who are responsible for life and limb of human bodies and human lives. And the standard there is a whole level higher than, no offense to a retail organization that sells some, consumer good off of the shelf. So whether that's an airplane manufacturer, or whether that's a pharmaceutical company, or anything else that has life and limb, you have to have consistency of the device always doing what it says it will do, and the device not being hackable by some teenager who for fun is going to kill someone halfway across the world. Back in Chicago, I'm part of the Internet of Things meetup group, just to keep my finger on grassroots stuff going on with emerging technologies, right? So 3D printing, augmented reality, IoT. And one of the speakers was a fire alarm manufacturer. So he makes these smoke alarms. And for decades, he owns this business. It's a medium-sized business. People were happy to buy a device that was a dumb device, right? Not a smart device. It gets smoke, it makes a loud sound, done. Now, consumers are demanding that it does more. That device has to text you and tell you that your house is on fire, and call 911 so that your mom who's in the house gets rescued without counting on you doing that, right? So his first thought was, hey, Apple Home kit is out there, I'll just use that. He sat down with folks from Apple and said, if I use your OS and this Apple Home kit, will every time when my device triggers the message that there's smoke, will it every time trigger the message? And they're like, well, no, sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. So not because he wanted to, but because his consumers wouldn't buy his old dumb device, he's pushed into the IoT world, and he had to build his own operating system and his own device. He wishes he could use something that was already out there. So yes, there's a low-hanging fruit, and then there's the not low-hanging fruit, but there's a lot of dollars in that not low-hanging fruit, which is in businesses that care for life and limb of humans.
So my response to that, in any growth of the market, you generally don't put your bleeding edge onto things that actually bleed, just as a thought on that one. But you can do it to disrupt current ineffective processes that exist today. You mentioned pharmaceutical, aerospace companies. Boeing and Johnson & Johnson are two of our companies that work with us. They're replacing paper processes right now and basic electronic processes in their secure areas. So they're not worrying about, a pilot is getting real-time instructions. It's a manufacturing process. And then they have QA checks that verify everything works. but the amount of savings that happened before that first QA check is astronomical compared to the old way. So that's what people are looking at in the market today.
And I
we're
would
talking about
contend-
lots of people that
I
are
would
doing
contend that
that
the
work.
environment that you just mentioned has existed for 30 years. That's every embedded system that we've ever created, long before we called it the Internet of Things. That was flight control systems, that was industrial automation, that was medical products. So you're right. I think the punchline you're saying is it's not just an off-the-shelf technology, and I'm not trying to say that. What I am saying is there are technologies available today, and we should have those firm requirements defined. You, as companies, you should be pushing your vendors, putting out those RFQs and saying, this is what I need to solve my business problems today. And if you solve my problem today, if you can give Roland an instrumented workforce, he's got to promise to implement it, and that's what's going to drive us all forward. So with that, thank you so much.